Tommy Swint, recently named as a person of interest in the disappearance of his former friend.
The focus shifted in the case of missing bride-to-be, Nikki Macau.
Reason I didn't bring that up when I was applying to be a police officer because they never told me. It was just routine question. Many people at the prison were questioned. Nobody was told that they was a person of interest or a suspect in the case.
As the evidence against her co-worker, Tommy, mounted.
How did you get Tommy Swint's DNA?
That was one where I think our agency just kind of called his bluff.
It led police to a bombshell revelation that they never saw coming.
So this individual called in and advised myself that we needed to look at other cases that he may be involved with. And in doing so, mentioned a name.
Another possible victim that sent Nikki's case down a new path of twists and turns. I'm Elise Coulter.
I'm Nathan Edwards.
And I'm Becky Golden, and this is Missing Nikki Macau.
It's August 2002, nearly 8 months after Nikki's car was found at her ex's apartment complex. Richmond police believed their suspect list was the best option to bring her home: the ex, the fiancé, and the coworker.
They quickly ruled her ex, Stephen, out. He passed a polygraph test with flying colors and also had a rock-solid alibi that police corroborated with surveillance video.
Her fiancé, Bobby, was still a suspect, but he cooperated with the investigation. Then there's her coworker, Tommy. Officers weren't sold he told the truth about his whereabouts when Nikki went missing, so they returned to interview him again at the prison where he worked.
This is totally informal, okay? I want you to understand that you're not under arrest. That's not why we're here, okay? We're here in reference to the investigation of Nikki Macau.
The first time police talked to Tommy, it was right after Nikki's car was found. Detective Mike Wright said his initial demeanor didn't signal any red flags.
If you watched or listened to his first interview, he's pretty calm, cool, and collected. Doesn't really seem like it bothers him being there.
But when officers returned to his workplace again 8 months after his first interview with police, his tone took a dramatic turn.
Last time I asked you whether or not you would submit to a blood test, a photograph for us, fingerprints, a polygraph test if we needed, and you had no objection to that. Is that still your comment today?
Well, when it comes to that, I have to seek my legal counsel.
Tommy told investigators he'd have to speak with his lawyer. That put up a roadblock to get Tommy to cooperate. So detectives pivoted to try to get credit card and cell phone records, which you can hear in his answer to them. Tommy was irritated.
I want you to understand something. I'll get them whether you sign them or not, okay? That's fine. Because what I'll do is I'll get the information by warrant, and what that's going to make you look like is if you're trying to hide something to this woman.
Stand all that.
Okay.
No. What I'm upset about is me being investigated for Nikki. Nikki was my friend. I want to find her just as much you or her parents want to find her.
Nikki's family believe the credit card reports may help police. Nikki admitted to going on shopping sprees with Tommy's credit card in the past and hid the gifts from her fiancé, Bobby.
Were there any credit card records indicate that there had been any previous purchases or purchases after she'd been reported disappearing?
I don't know that there was. Detective Redmond hit him up and wanted him to sign a release to get financial records as well as medical records. At that time, Tommy refused.
Detectives circled back to Tommy's alibi. Tommy wasn't at work the Sunday Nikki went missing. He was married at the time, but according to detectives, he was cheating on his wife with his coworker, Darlene. Detectives tried to nail down who he was with and where he was.
Me and my wife woke up, went to church. We came home, went to sleep. After that, we went to dinner, as we used to do every Sunday.
Okay. And I know you told me that last time, but I couldn't.
No, I didn't tell you that last time because you didn't ask me.
What I'm looking for is whether you were not, or you were at Darlene's.
No, I was not at Darlene's house.
On that day?
No.
Anytime during that day?
No.
Detectives knew Darlene lived at the apartments across from the meadows of Catalpa, where Nikki's car had been found months earlier. Detectives were trying to figure out if Tommy was at Darlene's house, and maybe near the location where Nikki was potentially at. Instead, Tommy would only admit he was with Darlene the day after Nikki's disappearance.
The following Monday, he and Darlene both took the day off to come to Richmond to pass out flyers. That being according to both Tommy and Darlene. There are family members of Nikki who say, no, they were not here.
Everybody in Richmond said you weren't there.
No, not everybody in Richmond said that. Detective Tammy's husband said he remembered. I don't know what Tammy would remember.
He told them that him and my husband were really close and that he was with him that day when we went searching. And he wasn't. He was here this certain day. And my husband was like, that's a lie. He wasn't nowhere around here. So if he was here, he wasn't with us.
Tommy's story was all over the place in his second interview, and Detective Wright said it was clear he started to feel the spotlight shift to him.
There's a little bit more attitude involved in that one. And that's also at the point where he decides, I'm not going to sign consents for anything, for the medical records, bank records, anything else they wanted. He decides that's where he starts looking at an attorney. So maybe he thought we had a little bit more on him.
The interview ended without Tommy giving police any new leads, and it would be 5 years before Tommy's name resurfaced. Now he was a police officer himself, but not for long.
Former Trotwood police officer Tommy Swint, recently named as a person of interest in the disappearance of his former friend, is trying to clear his name.
I was forced to resign. And the reason the chief said, because I didn't mention it, that I was a person of interest in this case. But like I stated to him, Chief, I didn't know that I was a person of interest in this case.
It was October 2007, nearly 6 years after Nikki went missing. Her case was running cold until suspicions about Tommy Swint resurfaced. He had just been hired by the Trotwood, Ohio Police Department in August, but his employment there lasted less than 2 months. He was asked to resign after Trotwood officials found out he was a suspect in Nikki's disappearance.
Richmond police kept him on their radar for years. Because of his connection to Nikki, his violent history, and his inconsistent testimonies. After being forced to resign from Trotwood, he decided to fight back and try to clear his name.
Tommy says he worked with Nikki before she disappeared back in 2001 and was last questioned by Richmond police 5 years ago. But he was never told he was a person of interest in this mysterious disappearance, and he didn't mention the matter when he applied to become a Trotwood police officer.
Reason I didn't bring that up when I was applying to be a Trotwood police officer, because they never told me. It was just routine question. Many people at the prison were questioned. Nobody was told that they was a person of interest or a suspect in the case.
Tommy held a news conference with his lawyers to distance himself from Nikki's disappearance and announced he was suing Richmond police.
When he sued the department, what were you guys thinking at that point?
I don't think there was a whole lot of worry about it. He knew clear as day at the point where he applied for the other police department that he was a minimum a person of interest. So for us to tell another police department that, I don't think there was a huge concern.
Nikki's sister Tammy was at the spectacle and remembers Tommy barely paying any notice to them being there.
We had our own little powwow down at the police department when he was suing everybody. He didn't say nothing to us. As a matter of fact, he was just straight up saying, this is BS, they're just trying to target me, I'm innocent. And so that's why he was suing. And he was with his wife at that time.
Tommy's lawyers claimed in the TV interview he took 8 polygraph tests to become a Trotwood officer, which should indicate something about his character.
Clearly, if something came up in his character that demonstrated that he had a propensity to lie or be dishonest or to hide or conceal matters, clearly the polygraph examination would have revealed that.
But did Tommy take a lie detector test for Nikki's case?
Did he ever take a polygraph?
As far as a polygraph goes, I don't see anywhere where he's taken one.
We obtained Tommy's application to become a Trotwood police officer. Inside were results from one of his polygraph tests, which included the questions and his answers. He was asked, "Have you ever lied under oath?" No.
When asked, "Have you ever been accused of sexual harassment?" Tommy said no, not formally. A female co-worker at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base accused him of sexually harassing her, but he was cleared by management and claims he was falsely accused.
When asked if he'd been arrested or accused of domestic violence, he said no, but admitted he had been accused of telephone harassment by an ex.
Was there any indication that this man could have possibly had a violent history?
In talking to Nikki's sister, she does talk about an incident where she walked in and potentially caught Tommy assaulting Nikki. That's not anything that I've confirmed. Numerous complaints on Swint from the correctional facility alleging that he was intimidating people, and some of that goes both ways. He filed complaints as well. I think the potential was there as far as hard evidence, concrete stuff where there's case reports or arrests made. That I haven't seen.
While Richmond police were still focused on Tommy for Nikki's case, Dayton cold case detectives reached out to them about another murder investigation involving Tommy. They had a request: get Tommy's DNA. Detectives saw an opportunity at the news conference and offered Tommy a way to clear his name.
How did you get Tommy Swint's DNA?
That was one where I think our agency just kind of called his bluff and said, if you've been cooperative the whole time, then consent to giving us your DNA. And at that point, the spotlight's on, so he gave in, because otherwise he'd look like everything he just said was a lie. So he ended up consenting and giving us his DNA.
A move that would blow up in his face and lead to an explosive shift in the case.
Richmond is the one that actually got the DNA for us, and they were well aware of the fact that he was a suspect in one of our cases.
Listening on Audible helps your imagination soar. Whether you listen to stories, motivation, any genre you love, you can be inspired to imagine new worlds, new possibilities, new ways of thinking. Maybe you'll find inspiration in the incredible true story of Black female mathematicians at NASA in Hidden Figures, or the fantasy world of Throne of Glass. There's more to imagine when you listen. As an Audible member, you get to choose one title a month to keep from their entire catalog. New members can try Audible free for 30 days. Visit audible.com/imagine or text imagine to 500-500. That's audible.com/imagine or text imagine to 500-500.
After Tommy's infamous news conference, police now had his DNA, but he didn't realize it was also being sent to Dayton for another murder investigation. An anonymous tip was called into Dayton Police's cold case unit. Detective Patty Tackett was with the unit for 16 years. She took the call and remembered how it came about.
Tommy Swint became a suspect in the missing of Nikki Macau.
Yes.
There was a lot of media attention during that time frame. So this individual called in and advised myself that we needed to look at other cases that he may be involved with. And in doing so, mentioned a name, which was Tina Ivory.
33-year-old Tina Ivory was murdered in December 1991, 10 years before Nikki went missing. She was found beaten, strangled, and dumped in a brush pile in Jefferson Township, Ohio.
She was known as a person who had worked the streets, that had a drug problem for a certain time frame. But this is also a girl that graduated from high school, that came from a good family, who had children. That a victim is a victim, and it doesn't matter what their circumstances at the time was. They still have family, they still have a past, they still have a story, and every single person out there deserves to have an investigation, to have their case be solved.
Tree trimmers called police on December 20th, 1991 when they found her. The coroner took her body back to the morgue and began the painstaking process of collecting whatever evidence they could find.
That included clothing, shoes, 2 large plastic bags, a possible crack pipe, a quilt, and duct tape that were used to cover her body. They also collected swabs of semen on the clothes Tina was wearing.
At the time, DNA was very, very new. What was interesting in this case, when you deal with people who have maybe been sexually assaulted or were actively sexually active with other people, you may get mixtures of what we called mixtures of DNA. And a mixture may be that you're saying that there are more than 2, again, what we would call a profile, a DNA profile in there. And so it could be 2 people.
In 2005, Detective Tackett had lab technicians run the DNA from Tina's case to find a match. They found 2 profiles. One was a man who admitted to trading drugs to sex workers in exchange for sexual favors. In June of 2008, detectives interviewed him. He said Tina looked familiar, but couldn't remember if she was one of those women. He cooperated and took a polygraph, which he passed. He was quickly cleared by investigators. The other DNA sample was unknown until 2 years later when Tommy's name entered the fray.
With the things that we found out about some other things that he did, his personality, the things that you don't see overtly, but you find out because of past relationships that he had with other women and other stories that you find out as you're doing a lot of these interviews. Then you start seeing, yes, on the outside, he was charming. He was a handsome man. He was very well put together. Behind the scenes was not what you saw on the outside.
Tommy's personality and past relationships came into focus. Nikki's family said he always surrounded himself with women but could be intimidating and always made his presence known. Don't forget, he sent lingerie to Nikki's bridal shower, and one time her sister said she caught Tommy forcing himself on Nikki and later laughed it off like it was a joke. The crime lab ran his DNA, and he matched the second profile.
So in that particular case, because he became a suspect because of that, he was then entered into the database because we got a hit, and he actually ended up being in the national database.
But that wasn't enough for prosecutors because it only proved he had sexual contact with her. Detective Tackett needed more for an arrest. She found what she believed was circumstantial evidence after interviewing people involved in Tommy's life at the time Tina Ivory was murdered. She tracked them down after the confidential informant tipped her off to Tommy.
The witnesses talked about a trail of blood from the basement window, through the grass, and to the trunk of Tommy's car. A blanket was missing from the witness's bed, where he slept in the basement. Police back in 1991 never spoke to these witnesses because at the time they didn't have a suspect.
And according to the witnesses, they feared Tommy and what he would do if they had spoken to police. They told Detective Tackett Tommy had a bad temper. Detectives showed him a picture of the blanket wrapped around Tina Ivory's body. The witness told them it looked very similar to the quilt he was missing.
Tina was wrapped in a quilt, and it was taped. A fingerprint actually came out off of the tape, and she could clearly see the fingerprints. And that's when touch DNA started becoming a thing. She saw this fingerprint, stopped doing what she was doing, and then sent it over to the fingerprint people. That was the clincher in this case.
A major breakthrough. The fingerprint on the tape was a game changer. It was the clearest evidence yet that they were getting closer to justice for Tina.
It was actually in the center, so it's not something that would normally be pressed down enough to get. So the location of where his particular print was not something we had on file.
Detective Tackett knew Tommy was Tina's killer, but she needed another fingerprint to prove it. So she drove to Tommy's new home in Alabama to retrieve the key to unlock this case.
They did a traffic stop on him and asked him to come down to the police station, and he did this willingly. So he was not under arrest at the time. He went down there, and that's when he willingly fingerprinted and stuff. So everything that he did was his choice. He was not under arrest.
Did he realize that it was for the Tina Ivory case and not Nikki McCowan?
No, he did not.
Next time on Missing, Nikki McCowan.
That girl look familiar to you? Never date a girl look like that?
No, I did not.
Nobody that you've ever dated look like this gal right here?
No.
I told you her name was Tina. Did that ring a bell to you?
Not at all.
The confrontation between Dayton cold case detectives and Tommy Swint, and the evidence mounting against him.
This was a guy that clearly 100%, without a doubt, killed a woman and threw her body and disposed of it like trash. That's not a good person.
As one family starts to get answers, Nikki's family is hanging on to a thread of hope.
Finally, someone has spoke up, and my family really, really does appreciate it. But if you do know something for sure, if you know that Tommy really harmed my sister, will you please call?
That's all for this episode of Missing, Nikki McCowan, a podcast from Dayton 24/7 Now. Find us in your podcast app and follow the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts so you never miss an episode.
If you like the show, leave us a rating or review. It really helps new listeners find the show. Missing Nikki McCowan has been a presentation of Dayton 24/7 Now, an affiliate of Sinclair Broadcast Group. Lee Furry is our producer. Brian Petrus is our associate producer. Editing and audio engineering by Eric Newell, with additional editing by Adam Braunstein. Mitch Hansen is our senior podcast producer. Jordan Roseri, a producer. Production coordination by Anna Nicole Wages, and legal support from Chase Bales. Rich Cook is the head of audio at Sinclair.
This is still an active investigation. If you have any tips about the case, please contact Richmond Police at 765-983-7247. For more reporting from Dayton, head to Dayton247now.com. We've created a special section dedicated to this podcast.
Until next time, I'm Nathan Edwards.
I'm Elise Coulter.
And I'm Becky Golden. This has been Missing Nikki McCown.